Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Melody Revia. I'm up here at Immortals Inc. with Mikey today.
What's up, John?
Well, I thought we would talk about some classic television today.
Classic television.
Well, I don't think it's that old, but I think it's might be classic for you. Tell me, please, that you have watched the Avatar cartoons from Nickelodeon.
You know what? Guess what? I actually have.
All right.
Part of my childhood.
Favorite character?
I don't really have one. I like the big. What was the big? That big creature that Aang
Appa?
Yeah, Appa.
The buffalo?
Appa's my favorite.
All right, that's cool.
That's just
Appa's
what I remember
fantastic.
from my childhood, watching the shows late at night, or just that's just what I remember.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I can't tell you how many times I've watched it. Dave Filoni, one of the big wigs on that, then moved on to do Star Wars stuff. So another name there that I have some passion for their work as well.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Connections.
Yeah. So Avatar Legends, though, is an RPG that's put out by Magpie Games. The two leads on this were Elizabeth Chiprodical, my apologies if I mangled that, who's done some work on both Star Trek and Seventh Sea, and Brendan Conway, who worked on Masks: The Next Generation that we talked about previously. It is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and the playbooks and a lot of supplements are readily available to download right away from Magpie's site. There was a 2021 Kickstarter to fund this. Game came out in 2022. They raised $9.5 million in that Kickstarter and got 81,000 backers. So they started with a little money in the pot.
Yeah.
But, license like this, you're going to need that, right? And it is that also funded some dice and a bunch of adventures and Wan Shi Tong's adventure guides. So there's some other support material readily available for the game as well.
When that happens, they, like the people who back the Kickstarter, they get rewarded with exclusive stuff, right?
Sometimes. It depends on how the Kickstarter's set up.
So
I think they offered alternative covers as well.
Very cool.
The nice thing about this is a generalized Avatar game. So if you want to play Aang, you can. If you want to play Korra, you can. If you want to play in a different era, there are 5 different eras presented. But let's kind of dive into the book itself. The first 10 pages are kind of a generalized intro to role-playing as well as Avatar. And then there's about 80 pages devoted to the world of Avatar. It covers the 4 nations. Do you remember those?
Nope.
Okay. Earth, water, air, and fire, right? We got the four elemental nations. And it looks at them first at a high level and covers, the major cities, the locations for the air nation, the temples. And then it talks about the 5 different eras that are covered in the game. So you've got Kyoshi, who was the Earth Avatar, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then after Kyoshi was Roku, the Fire Avatar. Then there was that 100-year war period where the Air Avatar just wasn't around for some reason. And then after that, we have Aang's era and Korra's era. And we get an overview also of the tech and the timelines and really the state of each of the 4 nations during that whole time. The next 70 pages are 3 chapters covering the fundamentals of play, making characters, and your core moves. And when we're talking about core moves, that's kind of the heart and soul of the Powered by the Apocalypse system, where your characters are going to have specific moves that they undertake, some of which they're going to be better at, and some of which are just a default part of the game. So it is just that basic Powered by the Apocalypse system, but it's specialized really to suit the media, right? To cover Avatar and the world of Avatar. And so the important part that introduced there is bending, not surprisingly. So again, since you're familiar with the media, is there a type of bender that you'd want to be?
I honestly probably want to be... I always debated between air and fire, because if I want to push you as far as I can out of the atmosphere, I'm going to try and do that with air.
Fair enough.
That's just what that's my opinion. What's the most popular one you think that people choose?
I'm going to guess fire is
Probably
pretty popular, but I mean, I kind of dig water.
Is that what you would do?
I think so. Yeah, I like the healing elements, which I thought were pretty cool. But then there's also that whole blood bending thing where you just completely take control of somebody, right? I mean, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, it is. But hey, I work on dark games.
There you go.
It's worth mentioning as we talk about bending that bending aren't really necessarily moves in the game. Rather, your character might use their bending abilities to take one of the moves, but they're not an ability you have. They're kind of just a story element that's used to justify the move. There's some nicely themed statuses, again, part of the Powered by the Apocalypse engine. And there's a really compelling example of play here that takes a few pages and kind of shows you how the story and the game mechanics complement one another to really emulate the kind of stories that we see in the Avatar television show and comics and what have you. Following on that, there's 44 pages that cover the playbooks. There are 10 different playbooks presented here. There's the Adamant, which is basically kind of a determined hero, the Idealist, who's basically an optimistic survivor, the Bold hero, who's, really kind of cocky, the Pillar, who's a supportive leader, the Guardian, who is basically a caretaker of his group, the Prodigy, who typically is going to be an expert, but a really arrogant one, the Hammer, which is, your iconic fighter type, the Rogue, usually kind of a vagabond, the Icon, who is going to be more or less a chosen one, and the Successor, who's kind of a fated one. And depending upon these different playbooks, you can see elements of some of the different characters from the shows coming up in each of these roles. After we get through the playbooks, there's some iconic artwork for each of them. And, like I said, you can see some of the characters coming through in different playbooks at different points of their development cycle. After the playbooks, we get into advancement, about 14 pages on there. It talks about growth, talks about specialized bending, and here's where we get into lava bending and blood bending.
Oh,
right.
Lava. I forgot about lava.
Yeah, that was in
Is
Korra.
that connected to fire, or is that...
That was fire and earth combined.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it covers the idea of changing playbooks or maybe retiring characters and starting a new one, even partway through a campaign. The next around 60 pages are more or less the Game Master section. This is running the game, talking about seasons and campaigns, and just running adventures. So there's some solid Game Master advice. It's really well themed to the kind of Avatar story elements that we're accustomed to seeing. And then it talks about Game Master moves, some sample NPCs, how to use bending, especially when you're the Game Master and controlling a bunch of NPC benders, as opposed when it's just the players doing their own thing. And then again, another example of play, but this time more from the perspective of the Game Master and how he or she's managing things. And then we talk about game style and theming, maybe if you're running a one-shot or a short campaign, or a campaign that's a series of seasons, how you might want to handle that, how you might want to set up arcs that cover through and flow through those different adventures or seasons of the campaign. And then there's a solid chunk of the book that covers adventure design. It talks about the formats for how you might want to make adventures episodic, and a whole range of different hooks that you might want to use to draw characters into each adventure. The book wraps up with some appendices, about 25 pages, covers techniques, a whole range of different non-player characters, including the 4 avatars that I talked about, and then just for fun, Uncle Iroh is in there too. And then a selection of moves and worksheets. So your campaign building sheet, but also a reference player sheet for you to compile your playbook into. It's hardcover, it's full color, there's some really cool artwork in here, a lot of which I think is sourced directly from the cartoons. 300 pages, published by Magpie Games. It's $50. We've got copies here on the shelf or available at immortalsinc.com.
Very well said, John. Go check it out below. We'll see you guys next time.
Till next time, folks. Good gaming.